So yeah, so the intention for this meeting was to do something, or to offer some kind of real action in the world, um, that addresses this complete despair and grief and helplessness that I've been feeling around what's happening in Gaza. And being personally connected as an Israeli, I'm not living there, but obviously my family, my friends, and my heritage, my identity are deeply entwined with the whole situation. And beyond any conversation about activism and what is there to do versus what is there to not do, and what is the relationship between inner work, um, self-work, and effectiveness in the real world, like what actually matters and actually can change reality, can make a difference in reality. And it's a huge question for me. And often when I was part of activist communities, I often got this pushback of like, yeah, but you're able to present this stance of inner work because you're in a privileged position, and if you weren't, you would have to make sure that you have food and that you can, go to a safe place and protect yourself and all of that. So yes, I also acknowledge that I am making this inquiry from a relatively privileged place, socially speaking. And yet I also think that even if let's say you have a privilege, then what are you going to do about it? Like how do you navigate your situation, and what do you do with the place, with the position that you find yourself in relation to the whole? And as we are part of a society that completely denies anything that is not physical, any reality that is not in the three-dimensional physical realm, it's very hard for us to converse, create a container, create a culture where we're able to think, okay, what is it that we're able to do, or in what way is our inner stance or our inner positioning or our process, our actual process with whatever is happening, in what way does it change reality, or does it have any reality? Because I think we kind of, at least in the activist kind of circles that I was part of, we kind of live in this, there's the reality and then there's what I feel about this reality, but not a lot of acknowledgement of how this is also a reality and how these two realities interact. And yeah, that's something I wanted to kind of bring into our conversation today, also from the perspective of the work that I'm doing as a therapist, and kind of drawing from Jung's work, where Jung, but also I think a lot of more, let's say, contemporary kind of spiritual streams are talking about a direct mirroring of the internal in the external. So the external reality is kind of a returning wave of a transmission, or a reality that is lived internally. So I can start seeing the relationship between the inner questions that I'm asking myself, my patterns, my positions, and then really seeing them kind of unfold in reality and come back to me and speak to me, kind of reflect to me, not directly, maybe 2 days later, maybe 5 years later, or maybe in that second, but there is kind of a relationship where the outside is reflecting and conversing with me. And I don't want to talk too much about this principle, but that's definitely something I'm working on with my own personal process, and as well as with the people I accompany as a therapist. And I am wondering about that in terms of effectiveness. Like it's not that I think that inner work or meditation or self-healing is the answer to the genocide in Gaza, but there is something around my ability or my willingness, let's say my acceptance of being in touch with all those parts that I'm saying, oh, this is the evil state of Israel, and it's not me, it's them. They are the one that prefer war. They are the one that are into getting acknowledged and not prosecuted, and all the things that I can now talk about Israel doing, or about the US doing, or about Palestinians doing, whatever. And to what extent do I actually agree to identify those parts in me and see them and see that they are there, and ask why they are there, and kind of clash against myself, and allow myself to act, like to clash against myself, and to ask, for example, this question of violence, right? I would just give a small example from my personal research, just to kind of open the channels. But there are so many examples. But let's take this question of violence, and like to acknowledge and to see in myself the parts that are really turned on by violence, really, really love violence, like love guns, love violence. And then we have to ask ourselves why there are so many war movies, and why are this relationship that we have to our aggressive, violent parts, where on the one hand we're pushing them down and outside of our personality, but then have this kind of fetish, weird attraction to those parts. And there we start seeing, okay, there is something about repression and commodification of a particular soul movement, that if I'm able to go into my own realm, and I'll talk about it later what that means, but go into my own realm and meet how I've been conditioned, for example, by generations and generations of, let's say, men and women who had a particular relationship to violence and love, and now have to, like, oh my God, maybe that's not exactly how I want to relate to it, but first I have to accept what I've inherited, or what I'm finding that is present in my psyche. And of course, to reach there is not that easy always. But I think the first step is to for me, is to kind of acknowledge that everything that I see in my external reality must somehow be existing in my internal reality. So there's nothing in my external reality which I can say, not me. If I'm truly, truly honest and truly committed to truth. And start from this relationship between the self and the collective, and the self and the collective, I would say, in the contemporary social layer. So the way that my contemporaries, like all the people who are living here now, has their own, let's say, scope of reach, whatever they can touch and feel and be connected to because of our identities and our communities. So there's like this horizontal kind of social collective layer. And then there is also, let's say, the intergenerational layer, which is the mothers and the fathers, all the information, all the pain, all the trauma, all the stuff that are, let's say, being carried by them and given to us. And also, of course, in the sense that if we have children, or if we are in any way like projecting our life towards the future, then that is also part of the intergenerational, right? It's like how we weave our own life in the context of time and of the different generations on this planet. So there is a particular relationship between, let's say, the self and others in the horizontal, and in, let's call it more the vertical sense. And well, the first thing that one does, or one, I think, ought to do when you want to go towards feeling, like, let's say feeling is not like, if you stop feeling completely, you die. And that's also something you can see how maybe not explicitly suicidal, but in many ways we are like, I don't want to feel this, so I'm just not going to be here, you know? And how in particular parts of our lives, we're not fully alive, not fully choosing to be alive, not fully saying, yes, I want to be here and feel all the fucking spectrum of, you know, how atrocious and horrible and also beautiful life can be in this layer. But through resigning, through choosing not to be present in particular layers, we're also not fully living. So if we choose to say, okay, I want to fully live, let's say I want to, like Yam says, I want to stay open and keep feeling, you know, not to close myself or to numb myself, but to stay in contact and to kind of turn towards, like, instead of running away, I'm gonna turning towards feeling. Okay, what's happening? So the first thing we can talk about is container. And when I say container, I mean, first and foremost, my understanding of what is me, what is myself. And that is a part that for me has to do a lot with therapy, not necessarily only in the sense of having a therapeutical container, but it's like a space where I can say, where I can stand in the middle and kind of draw a circle around me and say, this is me, and this is what I'm choosing to look at, and this is what I can take care of. And of course, you can never do it to 100% because we are interwoven. Like, for example, let's say intergenerationally, let's say that my mother has a long history of disappointment from men, and that she's hurting, and that she has not processed this pain, and she's projecting this on me. And in my own process, I'm like identifying that I'm actually processing something that's hers and not me. And then I can say to myself, okay, enough. Like, I don't want to keep on processing her questions, her issues. Like, I can draw a line. Like, let's say in my interaction with my mom, I might not take on so much as I would before I was aware. But then, to the extent that I've absorbed it, and to the extent that I'm in so many ways made of her, for good and for bad, you know, I've inherited this particular body that, you know, this is my grandmother's arms, you know, I have my ancestors in my body. Then it's also a question of what is really the separation? The separation is actually artificial, or it's psychological. Because, yeah, it's like, you know, the New Age says we're all one, but psychologically we're not. psychologically, we have to define a space where this is me and this is not me. That's a really, really important phase, which often gets really muddled, like really unsanitary, let's say it, especially in communities and in group dynamics and in situations where we're supposed to be held, we're supposed to feel safe enough to open up and feel grief and feel our own pain, but it gets mixed with her pain and how he is seeing my pain, and creates all kinds of havoc. So usually the first thing that I'm thinking about when I'm turning towards feeling is, how do I create a sanitary environment so I can feel? A sanitary enough environment where when I feel something, nobody is going to say, you should not feel this, or you should feel that, or you can't feel this because you're Israeli, like how can you feel this, or you can't feel this because you're Palestinian. Like, there's a lot in our culture that is indoctrinating us how we are supposed to feel and how we are allowed to feel. And if we really want to do this work seriously, I think it's about creating a container where there is an open, non-judgmental curiosity towards what's actually happening in the moment. So let's say that technically this would be something that would be better to do either completely alone or with someone you really trust that can support you in this in a particular way. And then this would be like the physical kind of condition, the setting, right? But then starts a more interesting, which is this discerning that I was talking about before, where I'm able to see what's mine and what's not mine. And when I really go in, I can't help feeling what I'm feeling, So even if my mind is telling me, Faye, do you really care about those children? Like, or is it the media, or is it, and then I connect to it, and I'm just collapsing from how much suffering there is, and to accept it and still feel it, and to accept it and to still feel it. So in this kind of sanitary space, I can have my own understandings of what I'm feeling and why and how my identity is connected to what I'm feeling, because that's a really, really, I would say, sensitive thing, that where we often are blocked, and where there is often abuse of power and enforcing doctrines, enforcing ideologies. This is the places where ideologies really can tap into the psyche. Yeah. So the first kind of thing that I wanted to share is about the container, and the container is it's like manifesting in the physical conditions, in the time frame I'm giving it, in whoever is there to support me. But container is first of all a consciousness aspect. So container would be an aspect of myself that is becoming dialogical, right? Like there's the part that can feel and surrender and collapse and like really, really dive into, let go, all the words of like surrendering into the feeling. And then there is a part that knows that it's okay, that that I'm choosing to feel this, that I'm not a victim of this feeling, that I'm not forced to, that I'm not doing this because I was made to feel it, but that I'm actually choosing to feel it, and that one part is present and the other part is then allowed to lose it. And in grief rituals, when there is a beautiful book, I forgot the name of it, but I will send it maybe in the group later. There is a beautiful book about grief rituals in Africa, in tribal settings, and they talk about in the community this positioning of like there are the mourners, the people who have lost a dear one, and they're on the verge of insanity, like they can really lose it. And then there are people who are allocated for them who are making sure that they don't hurt themselves physically, that they, that they are containing them, they are kind of accompanying them to go to the edge. So they can really go to the edge, go over the edge, but there's like, they have a rope, there's someone there who is holding. And I think when one does this work with oneself, there is an importance to create this dialogical relationship where, okay, one part is holding consciousness and awareness and can remind me when I'm feeling, what the fuck, this is so hard, I can remind myself that I actually chose this and I want to clash against myself and feel what's happening there and what's going on. So the container question is a really, really interesting question. I'm kind of going with it, and if anyone has something really important, burning, that you want to say or you want to ask, then just unmute yourself and you can make this into a conversation. And also, if you need a moment to kind of process, that's also okay, because we're also feeling. And I think every point that I'm bringing here, I could talk a lot more about. But let's talk now about feeling itself. And feeling, in my understanding, feeling has always kind of two sides, maybe the feminine and the masculine side. And I would say feeling has always, again, I'm not speaking from like any kind of authority, but just like what kind of the things that I've found out for myself. There are a lot of different writings about feelings. Like some people say that feelings are actual entities, that, psychic entities that are coming up to surface, and that the parts are actual intelligences that you can converse with, and like family constellation and internal family constellation work with this term that actually my inner mother and my inner child are in actual relationship, and they actually have their own independent relationship, which is myself is sort of like, okay, what are you guys talking about? And but let's put that aside. Let's talk about the experience of feeling. So I see in the experience of feeling two sides, and I would call it the feminine and the masculine side, or the energy and the message side. Okay, or you can also call it eros and logos. Okay, so with every feeling, let's say with anger, there is sort of an energetical imprint, like my body can burn and I have like this like this particular energetical imprint that has to do with anger. But also anger is a message. So anger in a particular moment can mean you haven't taken care of yourself enough. You need to set better boundaries, for example, let's say. So in a particular feeling experience, I have two parts. I have the and I have the message. So I have the logos part, the meaning, and I have the life force, or the eros, right? The energetic part. And why is this important, this distinction? Because when I'm cut off, from my feeling, I'm also cut off not just from knowing that I'm angry, but I'm cut off literally from the life force that this anger is providing me. And I'm if I'm cut off from the suffering of my inner child, I'm also cut off from the delicacy and the gentleness and the playfulness of my inner child. So if I'm losing the cognitively knowing that I'm feeling, I'm also losing the particular state of being that this part is bringing. So it's not just life force like a random battery, but if I'm not in contact with my inner child, I'm losing the particular state of being that the inner child can also give me. If I'm not in contact with my inner gun, like I just found out about this, so I'm like, what the fuck? But I have like a part in me that really, really likes guns and machines and like, and I'm like, ah! Yeah. So there is also an energy in that I'm really needing in my life, and that doesn't mean I'm gonna get a gun. I can, I still have the choice of how to, maybe I should, but how I live, how I express it. But the energy of it and the vibe of it is now like have come into my system. So yeah, so first of all the container, second of all seeing feeling as composed of two poles, polarity of eros and logos, or life force and meaning, or information. Usually when intense feeling comes up, the problem to feel it is because the walls of consciousness are too tight, either too tight or they're non-existent and everything is spilling around, right? But the container question would be, what is the right container to process something? So in this work, let's say, there is the possibility to connect to rejected, discarded, unaccepted parts of myself in different dimensions. So obviously the collective has a particular hook through the personal. So I would imagine that the pain that I can feel about children starving comes from my connection to my inner child or my connection to my inner mother, right? So I have like these particular personal hooks that are also connecting me to the collective. And depending on the container, I can work on both. So I can actually move between the personal and the collective pain, or find a way to kind of move between the personal and the collective pain there. And about the movement between the personal and the collective, I think there's something, I don't know exactly to consolidate it as a tool, but I think there's something around the process of creating a clear enough container to feel that allows then the choice with what do I connect. So if I start from the beginning, let's say I have zero experience with feeling, I've been running away, like our culture is trying to do, like running away from feeling anything negative or complicated, and chasing pleasure and pleasantness, and feeling good about myself all the time, and being really, really just good. Okay. And then I'm like, oh shit, I have to start doing something with my other parts. And that's the moment where you, in the beginning, there has to be some order, starting to do some order, because in the beginning it's like we are so hooked into, let's say, codependent relationships, all kinds of addictions, and all kinds of particular frames of mind and ways of thinking, how we were indoctrinated and conditioned. For example, let's take Zionism. I was thinking a lot about Zionism in the last days, and Zionism is a very trendy word to hate right now. and Yam and I were about the same age, and we grew up in Israel. And for us, we've been indoctrinated, or not, yeah, not just in a bad way, but it's really part of our mythology and part of our ethos, and has a lot of layers, and also a lot of mystical layers that have to do with a connection for the soul with God, and a lot of beautiful aspects of Judaism that are, in this, and the ethos of the Jewish people having their own land. And there is a lot of emotion, like many, many, many layers that are way beyond what the state of Israel has done with this concept. How do I move? Let's take this example. How do I move from my personal connection to Zionism, and how do I make my own relationship with it and determine my own relationship with it? Because one option is to say Zionism is evil, and let me throw that out the window, and I'm not that, and anything Zionist is evil. Fine, valid, when there is a genocide in the name of Zionism, pretty valid thing to do. But I'm also able to say, okay, like, let me explore my own personal relationship to this word, and let me see, okay, well, actually, this and this and this is really me. And all of this is my school, and fuck you, school. And like, all of this is governments and systems of control. And I reject this, like, I do not accept this particular mind prison. So there's something about, so this is just an example, but there's something about creating order. Again, like this example with my mother that I gave. If I am completely hooked into all these codependencies and addictions, then I don't know where I start and where I begin. And there has to be, I would say, a presence or a consciousness, a presence which is beyond the identities, which is beyond the particular role I have to play in society. You can call it higher self, you can call it, I don't know, the observer, you can call it freedom, you can call it heart, you can call it divine self, whatever, doesn't matter the language, but something which is able to make up your mind about what you feel about something, even if everyone else is expecting you to feel something different. And then when that's happening, then the relevant things will surface naturally and organically according to where I resonate. So I can also think of, like, let's say I'm a musical instrument and I have strings in me, like let's say the inner child string and the female string and the whatever, the Jewish string, whatever, string, and the person who's born in mid-80s string, and la 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 la, all strings, right? And then something in the collective field is happening, and it's like wave, right, flowing through me, coming through the media, but also coming through the noetic atmosphere of the earth. Because the fact that there is media and internet doesn't negate the fact that there is also telepathic field. That there is also some kind of level of consciousness which is beyond the material, and where we are connected. And I don't know much to say about it, but maybe the fact that there is internet and there is globalization is a mirror to the longing of us to connect in the collective sphere in a conscious way, maybe. The potential of not controlling or governing my own feeling, and kind of like how Jung says, it's like seeing what is there, like going in and listening and seeing what's actually there, and humbling myself in front of the reality of what is actually inside of me. And this has to come from a very open-minded, research-oriented approach to the self, because we are so indoctrinated by religion and by particular, let's say, Western cultures of good and bad and heroes and killing monsters, and a lot of a very toxic way of being in touch with ourselves. And it's not working. Trying to control it, it's not really working. You hit the monster in here, but then it pops up from there. Like, it's not working. Only by acknowledging the monsters am I able to find my own relationship to it. And yes, I have to meet those monsters in a protected, clear environment. And there is not enough I can say about that part, because now with the psychedelic renaissance and with so much psychedelics, so much very, very intense work that is done on the subconscious, which is happening in very unprotected and unhygienic environments, and where there is exactly this real danger. I mean, it's also a potential, but it can only become like our ability to influence each other and to block each other and to interpret each other and like to tell each other what to think there. It's so big. And what I feel that is really needed is freedom of choice and individuality, and like to really know myself and my very particular imprint weirdo self, and not to kind of, oh, I'm good and holy and I'm a good citizen and I'm following the mainstream. That even if people are saying you can feel whatever you want, but if you're in a group, you're gonna feel what the group, you're gonna try to align to what you subconsciously feel that the group is liking. And this is why when doing things that are more in the subtle, gentle layers, then there needs to be a particular type of container. And for that, there is a lot I can say. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the principle of death. And again, really starting from this image of consciousness or light and consciousness, and our negation of death and our understanding of death as something threatening and dangerous and contrary to life. And in my personal experience, consciousness is working like a cycle, like a circle. And also different traditions are talking about it, where patterns, are going in a circle, or ways of thinking, right? Consciousness and feelings, there is something circular around it. But the thing is that there is also the moment between thoughts and the moment between one circle and another circle, or one circle and a repeating of the circle. And there is almost, and I'm speaking about it poetically, not scientifically, right? But there is almost like this moment of in between, or this part of the cycle, which is the moment where transformation is possible, because there is a moment where something can fully die. Let's make it concrete. Let's say I've come in contact with the inner child, and my personal inner child is connecting to the pain and suffering of what I'm seeing in the news of children in Gaza. Let's say this is what I'm looking at, and I'm feeling it, and I'm crying, and I'm yelling, maybe for real and maybe internally, but there is definitely a connection to the feeling, and the mind is like, what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? And there is a moment there that kept happening. It sort of happened, but then I recognized it, and when it came, I invited it. It's like this feeling like there is nothing I can say, there is nothing I can do to make it better. I'm not trying to fix or solve or change. I'm just accepting it completely and letting my cognitive mind sort of like die, like fully accept and receive what is happening. And in a way, it's happened a little bit in every conversation. Let's say now I'm expressing myself and I'm telling you all those things, right? And there would be a moment where I will listen to you. And when I listen to you, I sort of die a little bit because I'm accepting someone else's um, movement into myself, and in a way I'm quieting. If I'm listening well, I'm quieting my transmissions and I'm receiving. So there is something very receptive about this deaf process, but it feels in particular levels of depth of feeling, it feels really like a shutdown, like the computer is shutting down for a moment, and there is a possibility for our really healthy life force resistance, what this kind of thing, there is a real possibility for it to, and then something magical happens, because then old patterns that are already too rigid, calcified, they can really die, and then something else can emerge. So there is an intelligence there about particular versions of myself, or particular, okay, I'm seeing, I'm connecting to my inner child, and then I'm thinking the world is a horrible place, and world is not safe, and I don't feel safe and legitimate, right? Like all of that, and I'm going into it. And then if I'm really going also in the eros level, in the life force level, really letting myself like burn from injustice, really allow myself to surrender and to die into this feeling. It's not that I'm getting an answer that really gives the right answer to this injustice, but somehow something can, like a little tiny different small shift can happen there. And for that, there's something about, and I don't know how to express it in other words, but it's a mystical trust that we're not in this alone. Even within ourselves, within our own psyche, the cognitive part that is now talking to you, right? It's not the only player in this game. Like there are other levels of intelligence and parts of ourselves that are co-creating what we call psyche, and our ability to accept what the self cannot accept, right? Like to come to terms with the fact that who knows if what is happening now is bad, and who know, like really honestly, spiritually speaking, and from a bigger, wider perspective, who am I to judge this and this and this as bad? And I can both hold this relativization, spirituality, and feel humanly, like really allow myself to humanly feel all this pain. And those holding those two parts, for me, that's really, in that sense, a psychedelic or a multidimensional possibility that is now opening, where I'm able to fully identify and feel for real the pain, and yet have a perspective that is able to tolerate not having an answer in this realm. And that's also something, like on a personal note, I can say that this is something that's coming a lot for me, where I know in a particular level of consciousness there will be no salvation and no solution and no cathartic solution. It's not going to come from this level, and there has to be through this helplessness something else can be born, but it's also through agreeing to, like, not escaping, not bypassing this helplessness, not bypassing the despair, not bypassing the horror that is very, very real in particular human levels. So that's the deaf piece. For me, in my experience, it became also really playful. It's like, okay, now it's deaf, okay, deaf, and then I'm like dying a little bit. And yeah, it sounds morbid and dark, but it is. And it's also, as I practice it, it becomes more playful, and I can recognize it also in, not in the dramatic oh my god fear, but also in the kind of mini moments throughout my process and my days.